Have you ever walked into a stranger's home and seen yourself staring back from the past? Not in a mirror, not in a memory, but in a framed photograph proudly displayed among symbols of power, wealth, and prestige. Jasmine Mitchell stood frozen in the marble-floored hallway of the Blackwell estate, the polished surface gleaming like a mirror. She had no idea how she ended up here. Everything was a blur. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the classical symphony echoing from the grand hall. The crystal wine tray in her hand was slipping from her trembling fingers, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the picture in front of her, an old photo, faded, but still clear enough to shatter something deep inside her. The little girl in the image, curly hair, uncertain eyes, and a slightly wrinkled pale pink dress, was her, Jasmine, at 4 years old. The picture sat in an antique gold frame, mounted firmly to the wall like part of the house's soul. It wasn't tucked in a corner. It was displayed like a treasured artifact. Why? How? Who put it there? And more importantly, for what reason? Jasmine had passed through many houses in her life. The temporary ones of the foster system, where she was just a name on a file, an easily forgotten child. She never had a place of her own. Yet here she was, standing in a place so extravagant that the rug beneath her feet probably cost a year of her salary. And she was staring at a photograph of herself, once a child, now showcased like a private, cherished relic. What could it possibly mean? She had heard bits and pieces of her story before. Lost documents in a fire, a single mother unable to provide, and a father listed as unknown. But never, not once, had anyone told her someone had kept a photo of her. Not just any photo, but a deeply personal one that could only have come from family. How would you react if you suddenly realized your entire life might have been a carefully constructed lie? Jasmine swallowed the wave of dizziness threatening to take her down. She knew she couldn't let her emotions expose her. This was a restricted area, especially for someone like her, a server dressed in a borrowed uniform with someone else's name tag. She had only been hired to pour wine for the night, but fate had led her to that wall. At that exact moment, the sound of hurried footsteps behind her snapped her back to reality. A cold voice rang out, "What are you doing here? Staff are not allowed in this section." The security guard. She turned, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry, I got lost. I was looking for the restroom." A familiar lie, but this time it wasn't to cover up a mistake. It was to protect a secret that had just begun to reveal itself. As she made her retreat, Jasmine took one last look at the photo. She memorized every detail, the pattern on the frame, the tilt of the image, its placement between two oil paintings. This would be her first clue in uncovering the truth that could change not only her life, but that of Chicago's most powerful man, Richard Blackwell. This wasn't the smile of a daughter finding her long-lost father. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered her enemy's fatal weakness. In that moment, Jasmine was no longer a timid server. She had become a new player in the game of secrets and power, and she knew exactly what her next move would be. Can you feel the tension in this story? If you're expecting a tearful family reunion, think again. Because what Jasmine is about to uncover will make Richard Blackwell's philanthropic reputation seem laughable compared to the calculated revenge she's been quietly preparing. 3 days after the party, that image still haunted Jasmine. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the innocent smile of the child she once was, now hung like a decoration in the mansion of the man who should have been her first safe haven. But where to begin? How do you get close to someone like Richard Blackwell, a symbol of power, the CEO of a global corporation, a board member of 3 universities, and a philanthropist funding orphanages across the state? That's when she remembered Marcus, the seasoned bartender who had worked nearly every elite event in Chicago. If anyone knew the dirty secrets behind tailored suits and polished speeches, it was Marcus. When Jasmine mentioned the name Blackwell, Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Girl, don't mess with that man. A guy like him has his claws in every corner of this city. Jasmine kept her composure as she polished wine glasses, but her mind was spinning. Why do you say that? She asked, eyes scanning the area to make sure they were alone in the service corridor. Marcus leaned in, his voice low, his gaze clouded with memories. There's an old rumor that he once had a daughter and she vanished without a trace. The kid's mother, his first wife, died in a suspicious accident. The girl was about 4 years old at the time. 4 years old, the same age as in the photo. Every cell in Jasmine's body went cold. The puzzle pieces were clicking together. Horrifically inevitable. Marcus continued. After the accident, Blackwell collected a huge insurance payout from his wife. And the kid? No one ever heard a thing again. It was like she never existed. Funny thing is, he went on to start a charity for orphans. You think that's about compassion? He scoffed. Nothing scrubs a guilty conscience like a nonprofit bearing your name in shiny gold letters. What do you think, dear reader? Can goodness be a mask for guilt, or can true empathy rise from the ashes of tragedy? That night, Jasmine launched her own mission. She created multiple fake social media accounts, dug through archived news clippings, private forums, and public legal records. She wasn't just searching for Richard, she was unraveling every thread of memory tied to Helena Blackwell, the woman believed to be her biological mother. What Jasmine uncovered didn't look like a family tragedy, it looked like a conspiracy. Helena had been a vocal activist for children's rights, publicly opposing private orphanages and calling for adoption reform. She had spoken out against shady deals between wealthy families and foster institutions. The strange part? 2 weeks before her death, Helena was investigating a network of adoption agencies accused of forging records to sell children. And then, she died in a sudden accident, too convenient to be coincidence. That's what Jasmine told herself as she printed out every document, photo, article, and copy of a file she had uncovered over 3 sleepless nights. With meticulous care and sharp instinct, she built a timeline, like a true investigator preparing for battle. 2 weeks before Helena's death, Jasmine's mother, she had been investigating private child adoption organizations. Then came the accident. Richard inherited the entire estate and life insurance payout. And at the same time, the little girl, Jasmine, vanished without a trace. Was it really an accident? Or a carefully planned conspiracy from the start? Jasmine needed the truth, not just to know who she was, but to find out whether the mother she never remembered had been the victim of a crime hidden under the guise of family. And she knew exactly who could help her. Margaret Santos, a retired private investigator who frequented the cafe where Jasmine worked mornings. A tough, seasoned woman, her sunglasses and modest attire masked decades of experience solving cases that the police preferred not to touch. That day, Jasmine set down the usual strong cappuccino in front of her, eyes tense with barely concealed urgency. I need a favor, Margaret. Margaret took a slow sip of her coffee before looking up, her gray eyes sharp as steel. From the sound of your voice, this isn't just any favor. Who's it about? Someone important. Very important, but I don't want to hurt him. I just want the truth. Margaret stared at her for a long moment. At 65, she was no longer easily swayed by sob stories or blind vengeance, but there was something in Jasmine's eyes she couldn't ignore. The resolve of someone who had been denied justice her entire life and was ready to fight for it. Do you have money? Not much, but I can work for you. Cleaning, filing, organizing, anything you need. Margaret gave a faint smile. It's been a long time since a case made my heart feel like it had a reason to beat. Tell me everything. And Jasmine did. Every detail, every suspicion, every shattered dream. Margaret wrote it all down with an old pen and a weathered leather notebook, as if she were rewriting a buried chapter of history. When Jasmine finished, there was no doubt left. You're not just looking for your father. You're hunting a predator, someone who may have killed your mother. A few days later, Margaret returned, eyes steely, holding a file thicker than any novel Jasmine had ever read. Let's look at this. In her hands was a copy of a falsified death certificate, a document claiming Jasmine had died in the same accident as her mother, though her body had never been found. Your father collected life insurance on you, $500,000. Jasmine felt her stomach twist into knots. A wave of nausea rose in her throat. He turned your fake death into profit. And he didn't stop there. He built a charitable foundation in the family's name based on the tragedy he engineered. Can you believe it? A child declared dead on paper, a mother silenced while seeking justice, and a father who used their deaths to build a false image of virtue. Margaret flipped to the next page. Helena had hired a private investigator before she died. She suspected Richard was tied to a child trafficking network operating through fake adoption agencies. That investigator vanished just days after Helena's death. That was the moment Jasmine understood. This wasn't just personal. This wasn't just the tragedy of one abandoned child. This was a system of abuse cloaked in prestige, philanthropy, and elite connections. Richard wasn't just a deadbeat father, he was a criminal mastermind, one who knew how to turn two lives into both financial gain and social capital. Dear reader, could you remain silent in the face of such truths? Should Jasmine expose it all now, or continue gathering evidence to tear down Richard's empire from within? If Richard Blackwell believed his little girl was dead and buried long ago, he was about to learn a painful lesson. Some ghosts don't rest. Some secrets, once awakened, become the deadliest nightmares. Margaret laid a thick file in front of Jasmine. Everything she needed to bring the truth to light. Forged records, fake death certificates, insurance payouts, and the evidence pointing to Helena's suspicious death. It was all in Jasmine's hands now. Every piece of evidence is here, Margaret said. But Jasmine, he's dangerous. If he could kill your mother over an inheritance, he won't come after me, Jasmine replied, her voice calm, chillingly so. Even she was surprised by her own steadiness, because he had no idea she was still alive, and that was her greatest advantage. While Richard Blackwell continued living behind his polished facade, preaching about love and forgiveness, Jasmine was quietly preparing for the shock of his lifetime. She had picked the perfect moment, the annual charity gala for orphan children, where Richard would speak in front of hundreds of powerful guests, media, and top donors. And there, she would destroy the illusion he had carefully built for over 20 years. The event began as dazzling as ever. Crystal chandeliers lit up the grand hall. A soft symphony played over the clink of champagne flutes. The elite mingled in expensive evening wear. On the main stage, Richard's voice was steady, each word perfectly measured. Fatherly love is something that can heal even the deepest wounds. I understand the pain of children without parents because I lost my daughter. Dear reader, do you feel the irony? A man who once faked his daughter's death for a payout, now lecturing on love. Do you think Jasmine should stay silent or finally return the truth to the world? As Richard continued his speech, Jasmine, still dressed as a server, weaved through the crowd with a tray of champagne, but the smile on her face now was no longer a disguise. It was a declaration of war. And then she walked onto the stage. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell," she said, taking the microphone from an assistant. "I have a question." The entire hall fell into stunned silence, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Richard scowled. "You don't belong here. Staff should know their place." Jasmine gave a soft smile, her eyes sharp and unflinching. "I know my place better than you think, sir. I'm the daughter of a woman who died seeking justice, and the daughter of a man who declared his own child dead to collect the money." She walked straight onto the stage. No one dared to stop her. Every camera lens in the room pivoted toward Jasmine. "You just said you lost your daughter. Unfortunately for you, I happen to have some interesting information about that lost daughter." Richard's face changed instantly. His eyes scanned every inch of the young woman's face. And then he started to realize. Too late. "First," Jasmine said, "that little girl never died in an accident. Second, you abandoned her after murdering her mother for the inheritance. And third," she smiled, She's standing right in front of you and she's got a few questions for her beloved father. The blood drained from Richard's face. He whispered, as if in a trance. Impossible. Jasmine Helena Mitchell, or should I say Jasmine Helena Blackwell, she cut in. The daughter you declared dead so you could pocket $500,000 in insurance and build a charity empire on blood and lies. Richard staggered toward her, trying to snatch the microphone, but Jasmine stepped back, standing her ground like a warrior who had waited 2 decades for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice clear and commanding, allow me to introduce you to the real Richard Blackwell. From her coat pocket, Jasmine pulled out a thick envelope. One by one, she held the documents high under the blazing lights of the press cameras, flashing like fireworks. This is the falsified death certificate for me and for my mother. This is the receipt showing the insurance payout from our supposed deaths. The room fell into stunned silence. Next, she held up a large photo, a copy of Helena Blackwell's autopsy report. It clearly stated Helena did not die in an accident. She had been poisoned 2 hours beforehand. Richard suddenly looked like he might collapse, his face ashen. This is outrageous. Slandered. Really? Jasmine turned to the giant LED screen behind the stage. Then how do you explain this photo? Every eye in the room turned to the screen. The image appeared, the childhood photo of Jasmine, the one she secretly took while wandering through the Blackwell estate. But this time, the back of the photo was visible. To the best dad in the world, I love you, Jasmine. No one could find words. 20 years, Jasmine said, locking eyes with Richard, her voice trembling, though her gaze stayed steady. For 20 years, I believed my parents were dead. For 20 years, I believed I was unwanted, unloved. Meanwhile, you took that tragedy and built a fake legacy, raking in millions in donations, money that never reached a single child who actually needed it. At this point, can the story still be salvaged? A father, a traitor, a daughter, a force of reckoning. But who's the real victim? Backstage, Margaret appeared, phone in hand, recording everything, her eyes sharp as blades, as if saying, now, let justice speak. Jasmine gave a cold smile. And the most ironic part? You hired me, the daughter you thought you'd killed, to serve drinks at the gala you organized to honor orphans. Richard tried to regain his composure. You have no real proof. No? Jasmine gave a slight nod toward the press. Journalists? Did you get the email I sent 5 minutes ago? It includes an audio recording of Mr. Blackwell admitting to his lawyer that he took care of his wife and daughter. Camera shutters erupted in a frenzy. Reporters rushed the stage. Some began live streaming. The entire media network seemed to explode under the weight of the bombshell. Richard stammered, eyes darting for an exit. You planned this? Of course, Jasmine replied, her tone icy. You taught me that revenge is best served cold. And dear father, she paused for emphasis. 20 years is long enough for it to be absolutely perfect. The room began to empty in a storm of outrage. Sponsors made frantic calls to cancel their donations. Richard stood alone on stage, watching the empire he'd built crumble, at the hands of the daughter he believed was buried forever. Jasmine turned and stepped off the stage. Oh, one more thing. She glanced back with a wry smile. The FBI is on its way. They said the evidence I submitted is more than enough to indict you for insurance fraud, murder, and money laundering. Outside, police sirens wailed. As the handcuffs snapped tight around Richard Blackwell's wrists, he realized he had grossly underestimated the daughter he thought he'd buried alive. But even amid the chaos, one quiet question echoed. Can a family destroyed by greed ever find redemption? Or are some wounds so deep that not even justice can heal them? 6 months later, in an office newly restored, one that used to belong to the man who tried to erase her, Jasmine sat in the executive chair. The plaque on the door now read, Chief Executive Officer, Helena Blackwell Foundation. Jasmine Mitchell. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about starting something new, something that honored her mother's final dream, a real foundation, one that actually served abandoned children. Because no empire of lies, no matter how gilded, can stand once the truth rises. After Richard Blackwell's arrest, all of his assets were frozen by the FBI. A forensic audit uncovered a shocking truth. Only 12% of all donations to the Blackwell Foundation ever reached actual orphan care programs. The rest, almost all of it, was funneled into funding the lavish lifestyle of a man who had built his fortune on corpses and calculated deceit. The irony, huh, Margaret? Now, Jasmine's official assistant shook her head while flipping through financial reports. You used your death to rake in millions, and now you're using that same money to do what he only pretended to do. Jasmine smiled softly, signing a check to fund the construction of a 5th group home. All the funds seized from Richard, by court order, had been transferred to the Helena Blackwell Foundation, now under Jasmine's leadership, to serve their original purpose, to save children like the one she used to be. The shift in Jasmine's life wasn't just profound, it was public. So public, in fact, that the entire country knew about it. From a server weaving through high society with a tray of champagne, she had become the cover girl for major magazines, hailed as the girl who came back from the dead to demand justice. Time magazine even listed her among the 30 most influential people of the year. Television networks fought for exclusive interviews, universities invited her to speak, and the public couldn't stop talking about the stunning takedown of a fraudulent charity empire. "You're more famous than he ever was," Marcus, former bartender, now the foundation's event manager, laughed. "It took Richard decades to build that reputation. You destroyed it in less than 20 minutes. And it was indeed a flawless takedown. News reports from the detention center where Richard was held only got worse with each broadcast. Former associates filed lawsuits, demanding over $8.2 million invested in the charity. 3 of his ex-wives, freed from non-disclosure agreements, rushed to release tell-all books titled Married to a Monster, Living with a Psychopath, How I Escaped a Killer. The country club that once honored Richard as a lifetime member removed his name from its walls and even renamed the golf tournament that had carried his name. The university library named after him took down its sign. Even the church he once generously supported issued a quiet statement. "We kindly ask Mr. Blackwell not to return." But amid the wreckage of the man who was once her father, Jasmine found something she'd never had before: family. During the investigation, she discovered that Helena had a younger sister, Sarah. For years, Sarah had searched for Jasmine before finally giving up, believing her niece had truly died. On the day they reunited, Sarah held a worn photo of Helena, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. "You have your mother's eyes. Helena would be so proud of the woman you've become." Sarah became more than a relative. She became the first real family Jasmine had ever known. Together they compiled Helena's archives, rebuilding her life story, from single mother to children's rights activist who died fighting for her cause. A mother murdered for telling the truth, a daughter who survived to reveal it, and a family line thought to be extinct, now slowly coming back to life. The investigation Helena began with blood and belief was no longer unfinished. With the documents Jasmine had provided, the FBI expanded their case, and the results exceeded all expectations. 47 individuals arrested, 12 illegal adoption agencies shut down permanently. One night, as the 2 women sat by a stack of Helena's old files, Sarah gently said, "Helena didn't die in vain. She planted a seed. And you've grown an entire forest from it." Meanwhile, Richard Blackwell faced a grim and ironic reality. Sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder, fraud, and money laundering, Richard lost not only his freedom, but everything he had. All of his assets were seized for restitution. The people who once patted him on the back and called him friend disappeared without a trace. His reputation, the thing he prized more than morals, was beyond repair. He tried writing letters to Jasmine. Every one of them was returned, unopened. In one letter intercepted by Margaret, he had written, If you are truly my daughter, forgive me. I have so much to explain. I was young and foolish back then. Jasmine tore the letter before she could finish reading it. Forgiveness was a luxury, and for a murderer it was a privilege he didn't deserve. But Jasmine's success wasn't measured by headlines or dollar signs. It came in the form of 847 handwritten letters she received every month. I got into Harvard Med on a scholarship. Thank you for showing me that the past doesn't define the future. Amanda, 16. I want to be a lawyer to protect kids like you protected your mother. Tom, 14. Thank you. Thanks to the foundation, our family reunited after 8 years. A mother wrote, during a special CNN segment 6 months after Richard's arrest, Anderson Cooper asked Jasmine, "Are you angry at him?" Jasmine paused for a few seconds, then answered, "Anger is a luxury. I can't afford to carry it forever." Richard Blackwell, ironically, taught me the most valuable lesson. Our origins don't define our destiny. He tried to erase me from history, but all he did was give me the chance to rewrite the entire story on my own terms. Dear reader, do you believe that a child once rejected could grow into a light for hundreds of others? The program ended with a powerful montage: 5 modern care facilities built, 200 children receiving quality education, 89 families reunited, 156 students awarded college scholarships, all funded by the very money Richard once thought would never be traced. The difference between me and him, Jasmine said, is that he used tragedy to enrich himself. I used tragedy to give others a real chance to live. He built an empire of lies, I built a legacy of truth. Jasmine stood before the newly restored grave of her mother. The rose-colored marble headstone shimmered in the morning sun, and now it no longer bore just a cold name. Helena Blackwell, 197520003. But something far more powerful: meaning, justice, and the legacy of a daughter who refused to stay buried. Etched into the stone were the words, Helena Blackwell, mother, activist, hero. She fought for children without a voice, and her daughter fulfilled that mission. Jasmine knelt and gently placed a bouquet of white roses at the grave. "We did it, Mom," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears, but her voice steady with pride. "And the most incredible part? The justice you searched for came from the very child he tried to erase. But you raised me to be unbreakable." She turned and walked away. The morning sunlight touched her shoulders like a quiet blessing from far away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Jasmine glanced at the screen. A message from the system. "Congratulations. The Helena Blackwell Foundation just set a new monthly record for scholarships awarded." She smiled. Not for the fame, but because now every action she took was real. That night, the city of Chicago shimmered beyond the tall windows of her apartment. In the quiet elegance of her high-rise home, Jasmine sat alone, bathed in soft golden light and the silence of a victory that didn't need fireworks. In just 1 week, the foundation she now led had raised more than Richard had ever donated in his entire career of moral fakery. But that didn't make her proud. It made her quiet, reflective. Because she knew pain could bloom into something beautiful if you refused to let it break you. Her phone rang. It was Sarah, who still called every night. An unshakable, warm habit. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Transformative," Jasmine smiled, her eyes still gazing out. 50 more children were adopted today. "What about you?" "I just finished organizing all of Helena's journals. I think we should publish a book about her life." Jasmine pressed her lips together, overcome. Even in death, she's still saving people. Have you ever felt like someone lives on through everything you do, every word you say, every dream you chase? Jasmine's greatest victory wasn't in the destruction of Richard Blackwell's empire, though that was undoubtedly a magnificent takedown. Her true triumph was in becoming everything he pretended to be, only 1,000 times more genuine, powerful, and human. Richard tried to erase her from history, but Jasmine didn't just rewrite her own chapter. She turned it into a torch, lighting the path for thousands of others. While he woke up each morning behind four cold walls, Jasmine's rose from Egyptian cotton sheets to a packed schedule focused on building legacy. And that was a victory no prison, no lie, no betrayal could ever steal from her. If this story touched your heart, remember this: justice doesn't always arrive with bright lights. Sometimes it comes quietly, from those once forgotten, once discarded, but who never stopped walking, because survival isn't just about weathering the storm. It's about becoming the lightning, illuminating the way for those still lost in the dark.